Good evening, and welcome to the League of Women Voters Forum for the candidates for the Judge of Superior Court, Office 21. Tonight's program is co-sponsored by the Los Altos, Mountain View, and the Palo Alto League chapters. The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 when women first gained the right to vote. Its purpose then was very much as it is today, to promote active, informed citizen participation at all levels of government through education and advocacy. We are a nonpartisan political organization. Tonight's Candidates Forum is presented under our educational arm. If you find these forums useful and are not yet a member of the League, please consider joining. Your membership and your dues will help us continue this work. Membership forms can be found on the table outside or join online from the website for either chapter. The Leagues of Santa Clara County sponsor a website, smartvoter.org. Smart Voter will give you information about the candidates, the state propositions, and county measures. It will also give you your polling place. It is one-stop election shopping. Please stop by our table outside, and there's a bookmark that you can get with the website. The forum is being taped by KMVT Silicon Valley Community Media and can be viewed on Channel 15 Comcast and on Channel 99 AT&T UVerse. There will also be a YouTube link on our website later this week. One note is about the questions for tonight. Candidates for judicial office are not allowed to make statements to the electorate regarding any cases, controversies, or issues that are likely to come up before the courts. Please state your questions accordingly. I would like to acknowledge members who are helping tonight with the forum. The question sorters are Katie Zoglin and Kathy Lazarus. Our timers are Nancy Brewer and Carol Hames Guthrie. Our greeters are Sue Graham and Crownie Billick. And our moderator for this evening is Jenny Lear. Jenny is a past president of the League of Women Voters of Los Altos Mountain View and has been a member for many years. Jenny also was chair of the Santa Clara County Council of Leagues. And I'll now turn over the mic to Jenny.
Thank you very much. Welcome this evening. The format for tonight's forum will be as follows. Each candidate will make a 2 minutes opening statement. Next, they will respond to written questions from our audience. Submitted questions should be of general interest as each candidate will respond. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Finally, the candidates will have 1 minute to make a closing statement. To help us keep track of time, we have our timekeepers in the front row to signal each candidate when their time is up. In the interest of time and decorum, the League asks our audience and candidates to abide by the following rules. For the audience, the written questions, as I mentioned, on cards provided by the League. No audience demonstrations such as clapping during the forum, and please turn off all electronics that beep. If any devices are being used to record, and we know we are on KMVT, we ask that the content be shared in its entirety to ensure that any remarks made are not distorted. For the candidates, I will enforce the time limits. After I say thank you, your time is up. Please end your comments if you have not already. Candidates are requested not to interrupt each other. Candidates may have a notepad and pen during the forum. The League has provided space outside in the hallway for candidates' materials. Now I would like to introduce the candidates who are running for Judge of the Superior Court, office number 21. Candidates are seated in the order they selected prior to the forum, which with 2 of them is not a problem. First, we have Mr. Dennis Lempert, and we have Julianne Silva. We welcome and thank you for agreeing to participate in tonight's forum, and now we are ready to begin. Mr. Lempert, would you please make your opening statement?
Thank you. I started my career in the law as a deputy district attorney in Santa Clara County. I was with the district attorney's office for 10 years, during which time I tried every manner of case, from throwing garbage on the freeway, which was my first case that I tried after having been a deputy for 4 days, up to and including death penalty cases. I was one of the founding members of the Santa Clara County Government Attorneys Association, which is the organization that represents all the deputy district attorneys, deputy public defenders, and county counsel. I was the deputy district attorney that founded the Consumer Fraud Unit, which now is called the Economic Crimes Unit of the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office. I went into private practice. In private practice, I predominantly represent folks that are accused of crimes. I was, both while I was a deputy district attorney and while a defense attorney, a Los Gatos Police Reserve officer. I was also a deputy sheriff for 5 years. My service in the Los Gatos Police Department was for 21 years. I have extensive experience in the courtroom. I spend virtually every day of the week trying cases. I believe that that experience and the breadth and nature of all of my experience prepares me to be a good judge and one that should be elected to seat 21.
Thank you. Ms. Silva?
Thank you. I was born and raised in Santa Clara County, and I've been a prosecutor for the District Attorney's Office for the last 23 years. During that time, I've had an opportunity to try felony cases, misdemeanor cases, to handle various types of calendars. And a calendar that a prosecutor handles, they're responsible for all of the cases unless another person substitutes in for 1 or 2 cases, which means that I have the experience to manage large volumes of cases, and I have the ability to concentrate on the cases and to do the right thing in the cases. The other thing that I had a chance to do is serve as a consultant with the Department of Justice for their drug treatment court initiative, as well as with their Amber Alert program. I'm bilingual in Spanish and English, and I had an opportunity to work to implement and get going the Amber Alert system in Mexico. I love my job, and I can't think of anything more exciting to do than to serve you as a judge in this community. My abilities to be fair and impartial have been reflected in the support I've received from over 10 police unions, as well as from La Raza lawyers, from the San Jose Mercury News, South Bay Labor Council, and over 40 current and retired judges of this county. I would love to have the opportunity to serve you in judicial seat number 21.
Thank you very much. Do we have our first question? Thank you. This will be for Mr. Lempert to begin. Do judges have an obligation to improve public understanding of the courts? If so, how should they carry out that obligation?
Yes, the answer is unquestionably yes. Being a judge not only requires someone to listen to evidence and make decisions, but to educate the people that come before the judge with respect to how the courts operate. I have been a teacher. I've lectured in Santa Clara University for almost 10 years, teaching people, adults, who come to Santa Clara University for professional courses with respect to, they are principally psychologists, teachers, and I teach them about the law. That is the same thing that I would do as a judge for those people that come before me.
Thank you. Ms. Silva?
I totally agree. I think that it's not only important that a judge be fair and impartial, but also that a judge be able to explain the judicial system to not only the people that come into the courtroom, but to the community at large. Having a system that people can trust in is solely based on what a judge can do and what a judge does is just as important as what a judge can model in his or her day. I also think it's important to share with kids, to have opportunities for children to go through the courts to understand and see how important it is to serve on a jury, how important it is to tell the truth, and how important it is to participate when called upon by a subpoena. So I completely agree that this is a obligation that any judicial officer would have.
Thank you. Ms. Silva, what qualities do you believe make you well-suited to be a judge?
I am very careful when making decisions. A prosecutor, we always get people always think that we just jump to a decision. But what we're actually obligated to do is we take an oath, and we swear on this oath that we are going to do justice. And where they're doing justice from the moment that you look at a case, the charges, consider the evidence that you have, consider any defenses that someone might have. That's what I do on every single case that I handle. And that's what a judge has to do every single day in the courtroom. Look at the law, look at the evidence, and make a just and fair decision.
Mr. Limpert?
Can you restate the question?
Yes. What qualities do you believe make you well-suited to be a judge?
Principally my experience. I have had a breadth of experience in the entirety of the judicial system. A judge is not an advocate. A judge is responsible for making sure that the parties that come into court get a fair hearing. That means being able to make decisions with respect to objections that might be made during a trial. It means being able to make decisions with respect to sentencing. It requires not only sensitivity, but it requires effectiveness in dealing with volumes of cases. That is what happens in the court. And unless you have that ability to make judgments, to make decisions, not rashly, but deliberately, but effectively, I don't think you can be a good judge, and I think I have those qualifications.
Thank you. Mr. Limpert, to be the first respondent, tell us again, why do you want to be a judge?
I have been involved in the criminal justice system in this county since 1968. I have seen judges that are excellent judges. I have seen judges that are good judges. I have seen judges that aren't so good. And those judges that aren't so good bring disrespect and abuse the system. I believe that I know what it takes to be a good judge. I have those qualities. I have that ability. I have the perspective of various sides, and I think that prepares me to be an effective and quality judge.
Thank you. Ms. Silva?
One of the things that a prosecutor does is we control the charges in a criminal case. So we're the entity that decides if a person should be charged with a misdemeanor, infraction, felony. That's all. That's all a prosecutor can do. And what I would like to do is to serve the community as a judge, because I believe judges have the opportunity to do true justice, to help people. Not only to help people, but to make decisions and to be a part of a system that allows people to support their rights. And for that reason, I want to be a judge, to do justice.
Thank you. Ms. Silva, how many trials have you handled during the course of your career as an attorney? Please do not count trials where you presided as a pro tem judge.
Okay, so the way that I understand this, it means tried as a trial attorney?
Well,
Okay, so I have, just speaking about my experience as an attorney, I've handled 56 jury trials. I have handled many, many more court trials. And by handle, what I mean is I was actually the trial attorney on the case representing the people of the county of Santa Clara. 30 of my trials were misdemeanor offenses, and I did all 30 my very first year in the office, which is pretty, quite a lot. Then I had 26 felony trials, which I represented the people on.
thank you. Mr. Limpert?
I have probably done in excess of 1,000 jury trials. I have probably done in excess of 10,000, perhaps even more, court trials. I have done thousands of preliminary examinations. I spend my life in court. That's all I do. I think my experience is much more current. I just finished representing in a trial of 2 months a child molest case that was ultimately resolved by an agreement between the district attorney and I. I have a murder trial starting in another month. I believe the nature of the cases that I've had and the volume of the cases prepares me better to be a judge than other people who are seeking the position.
Thank you. Mr. Lempert, if you observed a party in your courtroom being poorly represented by an unprepared or ineffective attorney, how would you handle the situation?
It's a very interesting question. A judge's role is not to be a partisan or an advocate. If an attorney is truly incompetent, it is incumbent upon the judge to step in and point that out to the party and determine whether or not the party is satisfied or not to want to continue with the lawyer or change lawyers. But I cannot, as a judge, evaluate a lawyer's performance, that some are better and some are worse. That is being a partisan and an advocate. That is not a role for the judge.
Thank you. Ms. Silva?
I actually had this happen. I was in a trial where the defense attorney, it was his very first felony trial, and he had no idea what he was doing. And the judge at that time did an amazing job of quietly and professionally guiding him so the case was not turned over on appeal for ineffective assistance of counsel. I believe that as a prosecutor or a defense attorney, your job is not to jump in, you're not to second guess what the attorneys are doing, but if you see incompetence, I think it's incumbent on the court to stop and to remedy that so that the person gets a fair trial.
Thank you. Ms. Silva, what is your experience with civil litigation? If you have little experience, how do you think this will affect you as a judge presiding over civil matters?
I have handled criminal cases for the bulk of my career. However, I was also assigned to lead the child abduction unit in our office for 8 years. And this required me to make appearances in family court, to handle cases involving an international treaty where we were recovering children from other countries. I had to also understand and know the law, the family laws as they applied in other states so that we could accurately obtain custody orders and return children from another state when they were abducted. Every assignment I've had has been a new challenge, and every time I've been in an assignment, I've managed to master that area of the law.
Thank you.
As a deputy district attorney, I headed and was lead counsel in a civil case that was in excess of 2 years, where I initiated a lawsuit against 7 airlines, a travel agent, and IATA, which is the agency that handles all the ticketing for the airlines. I have been involved in numerous civil cases as well as criminal cases, although the reality is, as new judges, we are almost certainly to be appointed or assigned for at least the first couple of years to handle criminal cases. But my experience, I was an internal revenue agent and I handled estate tax planning as a lawyer and as an attorney for the Internal Revenue Service. I have a very broad and deep background, both in criminal law and civil law and accounting.
Thank you. Mr. Lempert, what is your position on news cameras in the courtroom, including video coverage?
As long as the manner in which it is done does not interfere with the administration of justice, where the participants are acting for the camera and for the publicity value of the camera, I think it is a good idea. I think much of what we do in court is not seen by the public. I've had murder cases where there are no observers in the courtroom, only the people who are involved in the case. And I don't think that that's healthy. It breeds a a system that doesn't respond to the public because the public isn't there. So I think cameras would do well, provided it's done appropriately.
Thank you. Ms. Silva?
I agree. I think that the difference is, however, certain courts, they're not allowed to have cameras in, and certain matters are private, such as dependency cases, which I've handled dependency cases in my time with the DA's office. Also, juvenile justice matters are, you would not have cameras there, and you would not have the public attending most of those hearings, although there are types of hearings that the public might attend. I think it's important that the press have access to justice so that they can communicate to the public what goes on in the court. It shouldn't be a big secret hidden away from people. But at the same time, I like the word that he used, circus. It should not become a circus. That doesn't help anybody, and it doesn't help, especially justice, and it doesn't help the person who's facing the charges.
Thank you. Ms. Silva, as a judge, will you feel partial to the DA's position? Can you be fair to everyone who comes into your courtroom?
That's actually what I was alluding to earlier, is that as a prosecutor, I don't look at a police report and automatically assume that it's true. I have to look at a police report, read it, try to weigh and balance whether or not I believe what is being stated actually occurred and whether we could prove it. A judge would have to do the same thing. A judge would have to have an open mind, open ears, listen, pay attention, look at people if they're testifying. There's no other way around it. That's what a person must do to do justice. And I do it every single day and have done it the last 23 years.
Thank you. Mr. Limpert?
I was, when I was with the district attorney's office, both a district attorney and a police officer. As a defense attorney, I was both a defense attorney and a police officer. I have sat as a judge pro tem. It is, as an attorney, you are an advocate. As a judge, you are not. I have no problem in acting as a judge. I have done so on many occasions. There is no, in me, any particular bias one way or the other. And I don't get benefits by my findings. If someone is found guilty or not guilty, it has to be impartial, and that is what a judge does, and that's what I do.
Thank you. Mr. Limpert, Santa Clara County is a diverse county in many respects, from ethnicity to income. Describe how you are prepared to handle this diversity.
I serve as a coach for the Gunderson High School mock trial team. I have involved myself in community work. I've sat on boards of charitable organizations. I don't perceive people by their ethnicity, by their sex, by any criteria other than they are human beings. And I deal with them in that context. And that's how I would do it on the bench. I don't like the idea that one group of people is handled differently because of some characteristic that they have that other people in the court don't have. That would not be fair, and that does not give rise to justice.
Thank you. Ms. Silva?
I handled truancy cases for the last 3.5 years, and for a year I handled all the cases in Eastside Union High School District in San Jose, where many, many kids are not going to graduate from high school. And I saw that there was an inequality here where parents maybe are burdened with jobs, unable to supervise kids. Kids weren't able to have different access to activities. So I worked very diligently and serve as the chair of the Hispanic Initiative for the Boy Scouts of Santa Clara County. I also worked and did a clothing drive for kids for the youth space in San Jose, which is a place for gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, and questioning youth, so that they could have warm clothes, because many of those kids are kicked out of their homes. For me, it is justice for all. I want to make sure that everybody is treated equally and fairly, and that people have an opportunity to be heard, and that's what a judge does.
Thank you. Ms. Silva, Both candidates come from criminal court background. What kind of experience do you have in non-criminal cases, family court, juvenile dependency, etc.?
I would classify our juvenile justice court, it used to be called delinquency court, as criminal. I've worked in there 2 different times, 20 years ago, and I'm currently assigned there. I also, as I said before, had work in the family courts when I handled the parental abduction cases for the county of Santa Clara. And that was 8 years making appearances in family court as well as in dependency court, which is a court that handles cases where children are abused and neglected by their parent or caregiver. In those cases, when those children are abducted and taken away from the foster family, the county of Santa Clara is the victim. And so I made appearances in the dependency court. So I worked in family court, juvenile justice court, dependency court, and the adult criminal court. Basically, all the courts, very close to all of them.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert.
Those of you who are senior enough to remember, back in 1976, there was a proliferation of massage parlors along El Camino in Palo Alto and in Sunnyvale. I used the civil process to close 17 of those massage parlors on December 6th, 1976. I did the airline case. I have handled many civil cases. I've handled custodial cases. I have been in court involving restraining orders. All of that is civil type cases. While I do a lot of criminal cases, I also do allied cases. And because of my accounting and tax background, I also did cases that are not at all related to criminal law.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert, there are questions about basic definitions. Would you explain the difference between being a defense attorney and a prosecutor? What is the difference between a deputy district attorney and a prosecutor?
Well, a deputy district attorney is a prosecutor. A prosecutor is someone who is responsible for representing the state of California against a criminal defendant. A criminal defense lawyer represents an accused in responding to charges brought by the district attorney against that defendant. As I've indicated a couple of times, as an attorney, you are an advocate. In England, Queen's Counsel and Defense Counsel alternate on a day-to-day basis. I think that's a wonderful system. I think people who do it all the time, do one side only, get jaded and aren't as perceptive as they might otherwise be if they handled both sides. I have handled both sides regularly, and I think that gives me a rather unique and appropriate capacity in terms of being a judge.
Ms. Silva?
Just want to make it real clear that despite initials being used, I am the only DA in this race. This job that a prosecutor does and the job that a defense attorney has to do are completely different in my mind. The defense has to advocate for their client, and that is their sole responsibility, even though they're officers of the court. A prosecutor does not just advocate for a position, does not blindly believe the police are telling the truth, does not blindly pursue charges that can't be proved. The prosecutor, as I've said before, has to do justice. We are duty-bound to do that, to evaluate the case, to look at all the witness statements, to consider the evidence before we take action on a case. So we do not have a single obligation to a live client sitting in a chair. Our responsibility is to the people in the community that justice is carried out fairly every single day in every case.
Thank you. Ms. Silva, how do you feel our society has become, or do you feel our society has become over litigious? If so, what can be done about it?
I think we do have many cases in the civil courts and the small claims court. I did have an opportunity years ago to serve as a judge pro tem there in the Los Gatos courthouse. But what I think that can be done is I think that the road is being paved or is going to be made clear for opportunities that the courts can engage in, such as therapeutic jurisprudence. And I've had the opportunity to serve in 3 different types of treatment courts. And I think this is going to be the wave of the future. While I don't believe that the judge's job is to solve all community or personal health or mental health problems, if those problems aren't being taken care of, and there's a mechanism that the courts can use to help people, that's what I believe should be done. And I've seen this done by Judge Stephen Manley in his drug treatment court where I worked. I've seen it being done in mental health court, in our domestic violence mental health court, the STOP calendar, and I've also am doing it right now in our truancy calendar.
Thank you. Mr. Lempert?
Therapeutic perception is very interesting and very nice. But in Santa Clara County, there are 79 judges. There are about 30 judges that are assigned to criminal cases. In criminal courts, the judges don't have the luxury of creating or changing the law to achieve therapeutic purposes. They are there to judge. They are there to handle criminal cases that come before them, to be an arbiter of the law, to apply the law, and to make sure that the rules are followed. It is interesting to try in an esoteric sort of way to look at a system and try to fix it. But regrettably, that is a legislative function, not a judicial function. Judges who try to legislate end up spoiling the system because that's not their job and that's not what they're hired to do.
Thank you. Mr. Lempert, what do you think the biggest challenges facing the judicial system are?
I think economic problems that the community as a whole faces, where opportunities that would be available to judges in terms of sentencing, in terms of giving better consideration to cases, judges today are overwhelmed in volume, and that is a difficult thing to try to handle. And that I think is the biggest problem, is money. The courts have been stripped substantially of money. There are fewer clerks, there are fewer ancillary opportunities in the court, there are fewer alternatives for reasonable sentencing practices. And unless that is changed, things are not going to get any better.
Thank you. Ms. Silva?
I do agree about the financial issues, but what I also see is a need for improving or changing the system that we have right now. I think it's outdated and antiquated to believe that judges just judge. If that were true, we wouldn't have legislation that mandated treatment courts. We wouldn't have the finances that are behind the treatment court model, and we wouldn't have the opportunity to change lives. For example, a person who gets a felony conviction for possession of a controlled substance is going to be limited in their ability to get a job in the future. If there's a way to break that person from a cycle of addiction by having a judge serve as a paternal or maternal figure and have the other person affect change and do well and go to school and change a life, that to me is the wave of the future. And I can see that cases could be handled in a more productive way than just saying guilty.
Thank you. Ms. Silva, who are your judicial role models and why?
I have a lot. It's hard to narrow it down. I really admire and respect Stephen Manley for his amazing insight into people and the work that he's done to help those addicted and mentally ill who are in our community. But I also admire and respect Vanessa Zecker very much. She is very knowledgeable. She is very hardworking. She is able to very carefully handle her cases in a manner where she's considering all the facts. She expects attorneys to be prepared and on time. She runs a really tight courtroom, but she also has the understanding and the background ability because she's dealt with numerous people from different sides of life in her experience as a family court practitioner. I admire the way she conducts herself in her courtroom very, very much.
Mr. Lempert?
Two judges come to mind. One is Philip Pennypacker, who has just moved from criminal to family law, and the other is Sharon Chapman. She formerly was a basketball coach at San Jose State University and has a very unique perspective. She is a magnificent judge and has initiated many programs that have been of benefit to individuals that appear before her. Phil Pennypacker is the consummate judge in my view. His knowledge of the law, his sensitivity to people, and his willingness to be impartial and not lean one way or the other is, in my view, the role model that I would try to follow, blending both of their characteristics.
Thank you. Mr. Lempert, how would you ensure that someone with limited economic means would be treated fairly in your courtroom?
As a judge, I don't represent people. I represent the government, I represent the authority, I represent and have to follow the law. The county provides lawyers through the public defender's office, the alternate defender's office. My role as a judge comes into play in a criminal case only after someone is convicted of a crime. And in that respect, I would try to model any punishment to serve the rehabilitation of people rather than have a revolving door in terms of drug treatment programs, in terms of alternate means of sentencing. Putting somebody in jail and just throwing away the key is not helpful. It doesn't help the system, it doesn't help the individual, and it just breeds better criminals. There are better ways to do it. I have seen the better ways, and I would try to emulate those in my decisions.
Thank you. Ms. Silva?
Some of the best lawyers I've worked with were from the public defender's office and the alternate defender's office. They were county lawyers. People who are represented by them, it's been my experience, have fabulous legal representation. Where I have seen an injustice is in the family court arena. And what seems to happen there is we do not have attorneys who will work from the county, for example, as a county lawyer to help people in their custody battles and disputes. That's an area that I think is really needing some sort of change. We do have a fabulous panel that helps people do the paperwork themselves, but if individuals speak a language other than English as their first language or have literacy issues, their ability to represent themselves in family court might be severely impeded. And because of that, that's something that I'm very interested in, is figuring out a way where we can have people on a more level playing field in arenas like the family court.
Thank you. Ms. Sylvia, if you could change one thing about the judicial system, what would it be and why?
One thing I have thought about is we're in Silicon Valley, in the whole computer area, and our computer systems in the county aren't very good. And so I would want to somehow have a system that would turn on maybe a little quicker and something that would work. I'm sorry to say, but it's true. The other thing is I would wonder if it's possible on routine appearances to have people appear perhaps through a Skype or something like that. However, I do see how it's important from an accused perspective to be in court, to talk face-to-face with an attorney, and to have that contact with people.
Thank you. Mr. Lempert?
In this respect, I parrot what Ms. Silva has indicated. I think it is demeaning the way many courtrooms are run, with lawyers lining up between the benches, waiting for their case to be called, standing in line as you would in a market. I think that detracts from the professionalism and the perception that the public has of what goes on in a courtroom. Judges sometimes are not punctual. There was a judge by the name of Bruce Allen. When there was an 8:30 calendar, he was on the bench at 8:30. Nowadays, many judges don't come on the bench when they should. They don't stay on the bench as long as they should. And I think that detracts from the system. I would want as much computerization as is possible, I think there can be nominal court appearances be made without having to come to the courthouse. And I just got the stop sign.
Thank you. Mr. Limpert, what unique or unusual aspects of Santa Clara County make being a judge in this county different from any other?
Aside from the physical beauty of the county and the weather that we have, the people, we have such a diverse population in this county. Where people are from, the experiences that they've had, the intellect. I just tried a case for 2 months in Palo Alto. The juries are intelligent, they are incisive, they are considerate. I have seen and done jury trials in other jurisdictions where the jury panel is not anywhere near the quality that we have here in Santa Clara County. I don't know if it's the air, I don't know if it's just the latitude, but this is a wonderful place. I've been here more than 50 years, and I love it.
Thank you. Ms. Silva?
Can you remind me, I'm sorry.
Yes. What unique or unusual aspect of Santa Clara County makes being a judge in this county different from any other?
I would have to agree about the intelligence of the jurors. Our jurors are amazing, and I've noticed that, not that they're not amazing in other places, but I've noticed that our jurors seem to be very attentive and highly educated in this county. What I also noticed, though, is that there's a vast difference between, say, for example, a community up north part of the county where we are right now versus individuals in South County. And I think a challenge that we face is managing to effectively adjudicate and handle cases in a fair and consistent manner when we have such different communities and populations. That's something that I think our judges are aware of, and everyone who works in the court system is aware of.
Thank you. Ms. Silva, what do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice, if any?
Wow. That's going to take way longer than this amount of time. I think what a huge obstacle is socioeconomic factors. I see young people in juvenile court who are in horrible situations for silly reasons. Some of them are facing very, very serious charges and from the get-go did not have opportunities that other people have had. And I see that as an impediment for their futures, and I see it as something that our society will need to address and deal with, because this next generation's coming up quickly. And unless we do something to try to help individuals who are in less than wonderful circumstances, we're going to really be in a world of hurt.
Thank you. Mr. Limpert?
I think it's a multifaceted problem. I think one of the problems is the lack of education of many of the young people. I think part of that has to do with the narcotics and the drugs and alcohol consumption that detracts from the ability to learn, to go to school. I think socioeconomic, in terms of we have striations of people here, very poor and extraordinarily rich. And I think that causes problems with respect to the entire system, the people in the county. A judge has got to be sensitive to that, and the state of mind that a judge has in approaching dealing with people has to be sensitive to those differences and recognize them and try to overcome them as best as can.
Thank you. Mr. Limpert, what does it mean to do justice?
It means, as a judge, not to have a perception or bias toward one side or to the other. It means to listen to people, to let people express themselves in the courtroom. It means to have the capacity, the understanding of the law, to to follow the law and to apply that law to the cases that appear before you. If you don't have those characteristics as a judge, you cannot do justice. You cannot treat people fairly. People will walk away feeling slighted. And if they don't trust the courts to be just, a place where their problems can be redressed without violence, without rancor, without consequences that aren't inherent in the system, that is not just. It's not fair. And I would strive to be fair and just.
Thank you. Ms. Silva?
Doing justice to me means knowing and understanding the law, being able to look at all of the factors in front of you, being able to consider any possible defenses, and being able to come to a decision that is not based on emotion, but it is based on what is actually in front of you, the evidence. But I also think it goes a little deeper than that. I'm aware of a situation where a young young girl was selling type of narcotics to an undercover officer. She was offered a chance to go to the state facility as a juvenile. 2 other girls were also caught from a different neighborhood selling drugs to an undercover officer. And those 2 girls, they were given the chance to go home on probation. Why? Because their parents had money. Their parents were educated and had an opportunity to supervise them that perhaps the other girl didn't have. To me, that's not justice. Justice means fair, equal access, and equal opportunities for people.
Thank you. Ms. Silva, describe 1 or 2 of your most important cases and why it or they were important.
For me, the most important cases that I've handled were parental abduction cases. And in one particular case, our county had the opportunity to help a father who was in New York State, where they didn't even charge the mother with any kind of criminal offense for abducting her then 4-year-old daughter. 6 years later, we found that she had surfaced here in Santa Clara County. Very quickly after that, she took off and was located eventually in Sacramento County. We were able to locate her, recover the child. The child was then 8 years old, still in diapers, not in school, sleeping on a bare mattress. And we were able to have the father fly out from New York, bring the child home. That, to me, was one of the most important cases I've ever handled.
Thank you. Mr. Lempert?
For me, there are 2 cases that come to mind. One is the case involving Kirby J. Hensley, who was known as the Modesto Minister. I took that case from the municipal court in front of Judge Edward Nelson all the way up to and argued it in the State Supreme Court. It was an experience that very few lawyers ever get a chance to do, from the entire state system through the entire federal system to the highest court in the country. In terms of a personal case, I represented a fellow who was falsely accused of child molestation. He became a pariah in his neighborhood, and we tried the case, and he was vindicated. And his appreciation for what I had done for he and his family was just overwhelming, and I still have contact with him today. It was years ago. Wonderful case.
Thank you. Mr. Lempert, what life experience, if any, other than being a lawyer, do you bring to the bench, and how might that impact your ability to serve as a judge?
For 3 years while I was going to law school, I drove a cab in New York. People open up to cab drivers like no other than, I don't even think they open up to therapists as much, because it is totally anonymous. You have this guy driving a car that you will never see again. He doesn't know you. And the things that you learn from people, about how people really feel and think, the things that motivates them, it was the most glorious experience I've had in other than the law, dealing with those folks who were sitting behind me, having me tootle around Manhattan primarily, and taking them from one place to another. And in the traffic, sometimes it took a lot longer than one might expect. But that was a magnificent experience.
Thank you. Ms. Silva?
For me, I've done a lot of teaching. I not only coached the mock trial team for Del Mar High School for 7 years, the team that I was actually on in 1982, but I also have taught police cadets, police officers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, and was involved in teaching across the United States a prosecutor's course for parental abduction based upon our California model. I was able to go and talk and teach in Mexico City last December on a Train the Trainer, which had individuals from every Mexican state represented at that training. So I come to you as a professional, as a person who teaches, who loves to learn, has an open heart and an open mind, a mother and a daughter. I'm a native of this county, and I love the people in this county.
Thank you. We will now have our closing statements of 1 minute each in reverse order from the opening, beginning with Ms. Silva.
I want to serve. I've been serving you for the past 23 years, and I want to continue to serve. And I want the opportunity to put my intelligence, my passion, my dedication, my interest, and my unrelenting life force, I guess to say, to work here as a judge. I want to be able to resolve your disputes. I want to work in your family courts, work with your children who may be addicted, work with anybody that I would have the opportunity to. I am the best for this position because of my experience for the last 23 years, looking at cases from the position that a judge has. Can this case be proved? What is justice? I have done justice on every case, every day. I have not just represented a single side.
Thank you. Mr. Lempert.
When I was at the District Attorney's Office, I was honored to be sent to the National District Attorney's College and was a graduate of the first class of that college. I was a consummate prosecutor. When I became a defense attorney, I became a consummate defense attorney. I have a passion for the law. I love the law in the pure sense of loving the law. I think in my stage of my career now, being able to sit as a judge will allow me to use the experiences that I've had in a lifetime of life in court to bring to this court justice to the people who come before me, the fairness, the appreciation of the entire gamut of what people go through, that I served as a police officer, that I serve as a defense lawyer. I have a perspective that is unique, and it is current.
Thank you. That concludes our forum this evening. I would like to thank the candidates for participating, and I know we have all learned a lot tonight. I would also like to thank the volunteers who have made this forum possible. This forum has been designed to impart information to you, the voter, in accordance with our belief in the League of Women Voters that a democratic government depends upon the informed and active participation of its citizens. We hope the insights you have gained from this forum will aid in your making a good decision. Please vote on June 3rd and make our democracy work. Thank you all. Thank you. Yes. There you go.
Till at 8 o'clock, we will start another forum for the office number 24, and so we'll see you then.
Thank you very much. Really.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the League of Women Voters Forum for the candidates for the Judge of Superior Court number 24. Tonight's program is co-sponsored by the Los Altos, Mountain View, and Palo Alto League chapters. The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 when women first gained the right to vote. Its purpose then was very much as it is today, to promote active, informed citizen participation at all levels of government through education and advocacy. We are a nonpartisan political organization. Tonight's candidate forum is presented under our educational arm. If you find these forums useful and are not yet a member of the League, please consider joining. Your membership and dues will help us continue this work. Membership forms can be found on the table outside, or you can join online at the website for each chapter. The Leagues of Santa Clara County sponsor the website smartvoter.org. Smart Voter will give you information about the candidates, the state propositions, and county measures. It will also give you your polling place, and it is one-stop shopping for elections. Please stop by our table outside and get a bookmark with the Smart Voter website. The forum is being taped by KMTV Silicon Valley Community Media and can be viewed on Channel 15 Comcast and on Channel 99 AT&T Uverse. There will also be a YouTube link that we will put up on our website later this week. One note about questions from the audience for tonight's forum. Candidates for judicial office are not allowed to make statements to the electorate regarding any cases, controversies, or issues that are likely to come before the courts. Please state your questions accordingly. I would like to acknowledge members who are helping with the forum this evening. The question sorters are Katie Zoglin and Kathy Lazarus. Timers are Nancy Brewer and Carol Himes-Guthrie. And our greeters are Crownie Billick and Sue Graham. Our moderator for tonight's forum is Eleanor Yick. Eleanor has been a member and president of the Southwest Santa Clara Valley chapter for 3 years. And now I will turn the mic over to Eleanor. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to a candidates forum featuring candidates for Superior Court Judge District 24. I am Eleanor Yick, President of the League of Women Voters of Southwest Santa Clara Valley, and the moderator for tonight's forum. Some of this information that I'm going to say is probably repetitive, but it's always helpful at the beginning of each forum. This forum is being co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Los Altos Mountain View and Los Altos and Palo Alto. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization of women and men established to promote political responsibility through informed, active participation in government. The League does not support, oppose, or evaluate political candidates or parties. Although our nonpartisan policy does not permit endorsement of political candidates, we do, after careful study, take positions on political issues. The League invites anyone who is interested in government, politics, and serving the community to join us. We also encourage you to visit www.smartvoter.org for more voter information. The format for today's forum will be as follows. Each candidate will make a 2-minute opening statement. Next, the candidates in random order will respond to questions from our audience. Submitted questions should be of general interest as each candidate will respond. And again, I'd like to reiterate, since this is a judges forum, that the audience needs to be aware in crafting your questions that according to Canon 5 of the California's Judicial Code of Conduct, a candidate for judicial office shall not make statements to the electorate that commit the candidate with respect to cases, controversies, or issues that are likely to come before the courts. Therefore, some of our candidates may not be able to respond to some questions if they determine they meet this criteria. In the interest of time and decorum, the League asks our audience and candidates to abide by the following guidelines. The audience. Questions to the candidates must be written on cards provided by the League. League volunteers will be circulating throughout the forum to hand out cards and collect audience questions, and you see them on either side. We request no audience demonstration, clapping, so on during the forum. Please turn off all electronic devices that beep. If any device is used to record, we ask that the content be shared in its entirety to ensure that any remarks made are not distorted or taken out of context. And for the candidates, they have also agreed there will be no substitutes or stand-ins for candidates. The moderator will enforce firm time limits. After the moderator says, "Thank you, your time is up," please stop your comments. Candidates are requested not to interrupt each other. Candidates have brought no props to the forum, but they can have a notepad and pencil and be taking notes throughout. And campaign material, you will notice, is not displayed here in the forum room, but is outside of the room that you can look at the end of the forum. The candidates are seated in the order that they chose before the forum began. So I would like to introduce our candidates for this evening's forum. We have attorney candidate Ann Ray Angel. We have the Honorable Judge Diane Ritchie. And we have Deputy District Attorney Matthew Harris. The candidates will be referred to as Ms. or Mr. during the rest of the forum. So welcome, candidates, and thank you for agreeing to participate in today's forum. We are now ready to begin with opening statements in the order that you are seated. So we will begin with you, Ms. Angel.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Oh, first things first, let's get this thing down here. Good evening, and thank you all for being here to listen to us talk about the judicial race that's upcoming on June 3rd. I have been a criminal defense attorney in Santa Clara County since 1993. I started working actually a little bit backwards. Most people, when they start their criminal defense careers, start with misdemeanor cases. I actually started working with other attorneys on capital cases. So I was working on capital cases for about 5 years, and then I took a little bit of time off to have 2 children who are now teenagers. And then I opened my own practice in 2001, and I have been in my own practice since then, representing criminal defendants for the most part. Most of my case load is indigent clients who are appointed by the court. Their attorney, those cards are a little bit distracting. I'm going to have to get used to that. I'm sorry. The clients are appointed by the court through a panel, and that is most of what I do. I sort of skipped the whole misdemeanor part and went straight into felonies in 2001, and for the most part I've been representing clients on gang cases, homicides, sex cases, also drug and theft in there mixed in, but for the most part, more serious cases. I have been in court practically every single day of the last 13 years, short of a couple of weeks of vacation every 3 years or so. That has prepared me for this now foray into the judges race that we are now talking about. I'll get used to the cards, I promise.
Thank you. I actually should have pointed out our timekeepers sitting right here in the front row, and your opening statements are 2 minutes, so you get warnings throughout. Thank you. We'll move on now to Ms. Ritchie.
All right. So I'm running for re-election because I'm a great judge, and I want to continue to bring good things to Santa Clara County. I'm one of a little over a third of the judges in Santa Clara County who are women. So I have handled criminal cases, and I applied the law even when the attorneys objected. I have handled literally thousands of criminal cases, including domestic violence, gang, child abuse, rape, and other violent crimes. I gave severe enough sentences to cause real change in the behavior of defendants. But I also was innovative, and I brought diversion for prostitutes to Santa Clara County, and that means that instead of having to be jailed, they can serve 20 hours in a program where they go through detox, they go through counseling, and that way they avoid having conviction. I brought that to the court and to the DA's office, and the DA's office chose to do it. That saved Santa Clara County the cost of incarcerating prostitutes. Also, as a civil judge, because in Santa Clara County we rotate, so you have to go through the divisions in this. So there's criminal, there's civil, there's family, there's a juvenile. So I'm now in civil, where I've been for the last year and a half, and I settle over 1/3 of my cases.
Thank you. Mr. Harris.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Matt Harris. Thank you for being here. It shows your concern for the community and for the courts. I share your concern. For the past 23 years, I've been devoting myself to public service as a deputy district attorney for Santa Clara County. And in that regard, I was on all the DA's major trial teams. I've tried homicides, sexual assaults, gang cases, all the violent crimes. I've also done tours of duty, as we say, doing white-collar crime, large commercial bribery cases, embezzlements, and other white-collar cases. I was fortunate that the DA selected me in my career to make it a little more interesting. They loaned me to the U.S. Attorney's Office, where I worked as a special assistant U.S. attorney for 3 years, prosecuting federal cases. They also assigned me to go to the city of Campbell for 3 years to work on neighborhood crime prevention, where we tried to develop blight reduction and graffiti removal and things of that nature. I have extensive experience in civil law. I was with a trial law firm before I came to the DA's office. I've done consumer protection and asset forfeiture, which at the DA's office are civil matters. Ladies and gentlemen, the business of a court is very important to you. It's where people come to settle their disputes when they can't do it informally. That's what makes the job of a judge so important. The number one job for a judge is to be fair and impartial and give people a fair hearing. If elected, I will do so. I'd like to just mention a few endorsements I have. Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, 11 police officer organizations, the last 3 district attorneys, the Mercury News, El Observador, Spanish language paper, 4 San Jose City Council members, 9 mayors and vice mayors, over 100 attorneys, and I'm proud to say, since I'm sitting here, the Mountain View Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to questions that have come in from the audience, and the candidates will be answering them in a randomized order. So our first question, and is actually going to be to Ms. Ritchie, why did you decide to go to law school? We thought we'd start with an easy one.
Sure. I went to law school because I wanted to help people. I actually went to law school to help the poor. And for those of you who were here for the last forum, one of the things that does make a big difference in court is the quality of representation that's available to poor people versus wealthy people. And I wanted to be somebody who could help the little guy. And so that's what led me to go to law school.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
I went to law school after being out of college for almost 6 years. I was a corporate salesman for quite a while, and I decided there was something missing. I was trying to move up the corporate ladder, but I didn't find it very meaningful, and I thought that I would maybe find more meaning in the law. And once I got to the DA's office, I realized I had made the right choice. The DA is charged with doing the right thing. We charge people, we change charges, we bring them, we can dismiss them, but our job is to make sure that justice is done. And there's very few jobs in any career area where you're able to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Angel?
Growing up, my dad always taught my sisters and brother and I that it was important to do the right thing, and it was important to follow the law, and it was important to have integrity and tell the truth. One of his favorite statements was, "It's a lot easier to tell the truth because you can keep it straight." So he was very clear that you should always tell the truth. Part of that upbringing was his encouragement of me to study, and my brothers and one brother and 3 sisters, to study and to get an education and to go to college. I, for whatever reason, during college also decided that I also wanted to go to law school, and he encouraged me to do that. I was a political science major. It seemed sort of the natural next thing. I had an interest in the law. I had an interest in justice, and I was interning the Sonoma County District Attorney's Office, and that's why I went to law school. It was sort of the thing to do after the life that I had had up to that point.
Thank you. Our next question is, what does it mean to do justice? We'll begin with Mr. Harris.
To do justice depends on the case, and what I mean by that is that every case that presents itself to you as either a prosecutor or as a judge has unique circumstances, and you have to understand it in context of the law and the facts to do the right thing. Sometimes it's not easy to see what the right thing is. As a judge, you have to balance interests. You have to honor the victim. You have to give the defendant a fair shake, and each side has family members that are affected. So the judge should impose the law in a neutral, unbiased way and behave in a manner that people that don't win feel that they got a fair shake and a fair hearing, so that when they leave, they know that the court system works.
Thank you. Ms. Angel?
Doing justice is to make sure that everything that can be presented in a courtroom is presented in a courtroom, and the things that aren't supposed to be presented in a courtroom because they're not relevant to the issues at hand are not presented in a courtroom. That's very much what a judge is supposed to do in the courtroom. The other thing about doing justice is making sure that everybody gets heard and making sure that everybody feels as though they have been able to express themselves and gotten a full hearing. If a person does not get a full hearing in court, they may choose to take matters into their own hands, and that's exactly what our system is trying to prevent, so that people in court can resolve their differences and justice will be done. Justice doesn't always mean that everybody agrees on the result. It just means that the process was proper, that due process was followed, and that justice is completed by following the law and applying the law to the facts, basically.
Thank you. Ms. Ritchie?
Okay. So to do justice requires treating everyone who comes before the court equally. In the outside world, there are people who are powerful, there are people who are rich, there are people who are poor and powerless, but inside a courtroom, everyone is equal, and everyone must be treated with respect. So that's the first part. The next part is that you must apply the law, which means you must know the law. It takes study, it takes working over time, but that's what's important. And then you have to apply it to the facts. And the way you know the facts is to listen very carefully to the testimony of the witnesses. Not what the attorneys suggest, but what the witnesses testify to.
Thank you. Our next question is, do judges have an obligation to improve public understanding of the courts? And if so, how should they carry out that obligation? And we'll begin with Ms. Angel.
Yes, I think there is too little information in the public arena about what goes on in our courts. Everybody thinks it's like Law and Order, or LA Law was the thing that we watched in law school, and we were always criticizing that that's not the way it really was, and we already knew that even in law school. So I think it's important, certainly everyone who comes into a judge's courtroom should be, the judge should make sure that the parties in the court know what the procedures are. There are some judges in our county that actually will tell jurors sort of what the process is before they even start. There are other judges who don't say a word, and the jurors are sort of wondering what's next. I think the same thing happens with parties sometimes. So yes, I think it's incumbent upon the judges to make sure that everyone in the courtroom understands the process, and where possible to even extend that out into the public by doing whatever it is that they can do to educate those of you who aren't in the courtroom every day.
Thank you. Ms. Ritchie?
Okay. So yes, obviously judges do have an obligation. I sometimes feel that the courts are the branch of government that's, under the radar. I mean, you hear a lot about the executive branch and the legislative branch, but we absolutely have to get the word out. Some of the things that I do, I judge mock trials. I have judged mock trials for high schools. I think that's really important. These are brilliant young people. I obviously judge it for law school also. I have children come into my department. I have a lot of fourth graders come in. I have Cub Scouts. I try to make it as available as possible. And if you ever want to come down to Department 10 and watch a trial, come on down.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
At the DA's office, I participated in what we call LRE, law-related education. And we would go into elementary schools and teach the kids a court-oriented civics lesson. and usually I would pair up with a police officer and a judge, and we would go in and explain how things worked, and then have a mock trial. And the kids really get a kick out of it, and they learn a lot about the court system. I've also been someone who's gone to high schools, and I've actually tried actual DUI cases in high school auditoriums for the students in conjunction with Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, where we bring out a wrecked car to show them what could happen. Now, looking forward as a judge, especially in Santa Clara County, where we have so much diversity, a judge needs to reach out to each community to let the people know that the court is there for them too. And it's something I've learned during the campaign, is that people from all countries and walks of life that arrive here are very interested in what we're doing.
Thank you. Our next question is, what do you perceive as the greatest obstacle to justice, if any? And we'll begin with Ms. Ritchie.
I do perceive the greatest obstacle being the difference in wealth between two parties. If you have two parties, like I do a lot of business cases. You know what? In a business case, usually the parties have about the same level of wealth. But when I do see cases where there's a very different amount of wealth, it does affect the trial, and it really takes, I mean, at least if it's a court trial, I can make that difference. I'm the one who's judging it. I can make sure that I treat both sides differently, but I do not treat, the sides differently. But yes, I think that probably wealth and the ability, we have a lot of languages in Santa Clara County, and if there is difficulty with English, it dramatically, it harms the party.
Thank you. Mr. Harris.
The criminal justice system has a lot of moving parts. For it to work well, the police have to do their job, the DA has to do their job, the attorneys, the court, probation. Everybody has to work together to do it. Certainly, defendants that are well off that can afford a stable of experts may have an advantage in some cases, but our county is a very progressive county, and we have an excellent public defenders department, and they give excellent representation. I think in our county, we have as close as you can come in California to a fair playing field.
Thank you. Ms. Angel.
I think in the criminal justice system, there probably aren't too many impediments to justice. And the reason I say that is along the same lines as Mr. Harris was mentioning. The Public Defender's Office, the Alternate Defender's Office, and another entity called the Independent Defender's Office, which is who I work for, we are appointed to indigent clients who don't have representation. The resources that are open to us are the same as would be open to wealthy clients who hire their own attorneys. We are able to bring in the experts and do all the rest. I think the biggest impediment to justice in Santa Clara County is not in the criminal courts. It's in the courts where there isn't mandated representation, where you have in family court, if you have somebody who's represented and somebody who isn't, you've got a pro per, and they may not know exactly what to do or how to do it. So I think that's where the bigger problem is. It wouldn't be in the criminal courts. I think everyone there is equally represented.
Thank you. Our next question is, how many trials have you personally handled during the course of your career as an attorney? Please do not count trials where you presided as an elected judge or a pro tem judge. Not sure what a pro tem judge is.
Temporary judge.
Temporary judge.
So you want me to completely leave out any experience I've had as a judge?
No, as a
Well, the
temporary
question says, well, no, it does say, please do not count trials where you presided as an elected judge.
Okay, so nothing in the last 5 years. Okay.
Okay, and we'll begin with Mr. Harris.
I've had probably 70 plus trials, from homicide, capital homicide, sexual assault, all the violent crimes, all the way down to misdemeanor battery, delaying an officer, DUI.
Thank you. Ms. Angel?
The number, I believe, and I did actually try to figure it out, but I kept forgetting things and then remembering them later. So it's somewhere between 35 and 40. That includes only 2 misdemeanor trials. The rest were all serious felonies. The death penalty cases I was talking about before, gang cases, homicide, sex cases, robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, life cases, those kinds of things. So between 35 and 40.
Thank you. Ms. Ritchie?
Okay, before I became a judge, I probably handled about 50 cases. I certainly have handled, and I'm just going to say it, I've handled literally thousands since I was a judge, because as a judge, you're in trial all the time. So I know.
Yeah, the question did say before as an elected judge, so if you
Right.
would continue on what you were saying.
No,
Yeah.
I'd say about 50. I was a district attorney for a short time, for 3.5 years. So I handled criminal cases, including child molest. And I also handled a lot of civil cases, including cases, class actions that were multi-million-dollar class actions. And I handled a case against a school district for allowing harassment based on sexual orientation that made new law.
Okay, thank you. Our next question says, please describe 1 or 2 of your most important cases and why it or they were important to you. And we'll begin with Ms. Angel.
It's hard to take just 2 cases. Every single case to me is important. And even if it's a misdemeanor case, up to the homicide cases, because each of those cases involves a person. And for that person, that particular event in their life is pretty much the most important thing they will be dealing with at that time. Even someone who's had 5 or 6 convictions previously, their new conviction is just as important to them as anything else. And it's even a person with a first conviction, same thing. So it's very hard for me to say which ones are more important. The ones that I'm working on are the most important cases that I have.
Thank you. Ms. Ritchie?
First, I'll say I've had several cases in criminal law where I had to sentence very carefully and change the behavior of the defendant. So I had a case where a defendant was convicted of assault, which is throwing a punch but not connecting, and disturbing the peace. He was terrorizing his neighborhood. He was screaming all sorts of vulgar words. And so when he was convicted, I decided that I would make him have, 1, he had to go to 30 days in county jail. 2, he had to keep 300 yards away from his neighbors, which made him have to move out of his parents' house. He was 40 years old. And I also made him go through counseling and get a job. And I followed him for his time through probation to make sure that he accomplished these things. And he went from this 40-year-old maladjusted person to a member of society.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
I'd mention 2. One was a capital case in which the defendant had last been seen with a teenage girl, and she was found naked in a ditch up in Mount Madonna Park, strangled, and he's serving a life term, and that was his 3rd rape. His first rape in Missouri went unreported. His second one was reported, and he went to prison, and his 3rd was mine and killed the victim. So I know that I feel I did a public service by preventing something in the future. Another case that meant a lot to me was a DUI murder where the defendant had 6 prior convictions for DUI, including felony DUI, where he'd injured people probably on 3 other occasions, and he was coming from the county fair, and his kids begged him not to drive, but he did, and he ended up colliding with a car and killing a grade school student and brain damaging an MIT student.
Thank you. The next question is, who are your judicial role models and why? And we'll begin with Ms. Ritchie.
LaDoris Cordell, Patricia Lucas, Those are probably my two biggest judicial, and also Phil Pennypacker. Those are my biggest judicial role models.
And why?
Oh, and why? LaDoris Cordell was very innovative in what she did. When our jail didn't even have enough room to incarcerate people, so they got convicted and then they got booted out. She said, for DUI, I'm going to have people blow into an ignition interlock device so they can't start their car if they're drunk. She said, you know, I'm in family court and we're getting a hard time having people pay their child support because they can't see their kids. So she went to senior centers and asked if they would supervise so a father could see their children. And then it starts and that's the kind of thing that I want to do.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
I would say Judge Stephen Manley. I was just there this afternoon, sitting in for another DA on the mental health calendar. Judge Manley, I've been associated with him since the 90s when he was at the Sunnyvale Court, and I was the Sunnyvale misdemeanor DA there, and we had many trials together. I didn't know it at the time that he was a visionary, that he would bring drug court and mental health court and veterans court to Santa Clara County, but he was clearly ahead of his time. And not only that, it's not easy to change big institutions, and Judge Manley has probably changed the Santa Clara County courts for the better and in a way that few people have before.
Thank you. Ms. Angel?
I would agree with regard to Judge Manley. Three other judges that I have enjoyed being in front of are Michelle McKay McCoy, Linda Clark, and Gilbert Brown. And the reason I have enjoyed those three judges is because they know the law so well. And if you know the law that well, they can run their courtroom in a way that everything that happens makes sense, because it makes sense based on the law. And those three judges do that. There are others that do too. And I hesitate even giving names, but since I didn't say which clients were most important or which cases were most important, I didn't want to be, avoiding the question again. But there are lots of judges in this county who are wonderful, and I have learned so much from all of them appearing in front of them. And to just name the four that I've mentioned is sort of unfair to the rest. We have a very good bench for the most part. Competent, skilled judges.
Thank you. Our next question is, if you could change one thing about the judicial system, what would it be and why? And we'll begin with Mr. Harris.
Wow.
Wow.
Probably the thing that's on most everybody's mind now is where they're going to come up with the money for the future because of AB 109 and the fact that we are going to have more people housed in county jail that used to go to prison. And so we're going to need a lot more services, job training, and vehicles to get them reintegrated into the community. And to do that with our budget is going to be very difficult. I think that what we're going to have to do is engage in a lot of court partnerships with service providers and associations that can provide drug and alcohol counseling and things like that. So I guess if I could make a wish, it would be for a bigger budget so that the court could do what it's mandated to do.
Thank you. Ms. Angel?
There are two things in Santa Clara County that I find difficult. One is the way that we have in misdemeanor courts private attorney day, and then we have 50 private attorneys having to address the court all in the same time. I think we should split that around. But another one that's probably a little more controversial is the issue of charging juveniles as adults. And as of late, that has been happening a lot more in our courts, and it is my understanding from the literature that juveniles' brains are not yet completely developed, and we're talking about 15 and 16-year-old children. And I would want to change the way those decisions are being made. And that's the justice system. I don't know that the judges are going to have the ability to do that, but it certainly is our system.
Thank you. Ms. Ritchie?
I'm going to go ditto on the budget, but since he took it, I've got my own. And we really need interpreters in civil court. The court does not provide interpreters in civil court, and obviously our county is just as diverse in civil as it is in criminal, and we guarantee the many languages that are spoken, have interpreters in criminal court. But people are facing eviction, people are facing lawsuits where they don't have the interpreters, and it really, I know we can't afford it right now, but that is what I would really like to see because it's such a huge barrier.
Thank you. The next question is, and it kind of builds on that, Santa Clara County is a diverse county in many respects, from ethnicity to income. Describe how you are prepared to handle this diversity. And we'll begin with Ms. Angel.
I don't know that you have to be prepared to handle diversity. I just don't notice when somebody's of a different ethnic group. What you notice is a person, and what you notice are the facts of the case. So I think I'm prepared to deal with diversity because diversity isn't an issue for me.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ritchie?
Actually, I guess the way it jumps out at me the most is in juries, especially when we have jurors from countries whose judicial systems are very poor. They really don't have any motivation to be on the jury, but we have to have our jurors represent our community. Also, we do have, and I've already said, we do have people from every country in the world, and they do have different methods of communication and different, not just in their language, and different values, and that has to be accommodated in the court. So I think we do need to.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
A lot of what happens in the judicial system when you're dealing with people from other cultures is a matter of trust. As a DA, trying to bring witnesses who have grown up in another country to bring them into court and testify when they may be afraid of repercussions. They may come from a culture where the police are corrupt, where they don't trust the courts, or where the people that hurt them originally might hurt them again. And so sometimes you have to take time and build that trust. And I think that as a judge, you should go to the community, you should reach out to different cultures, should go to their associations and meetings and let them know that you know they're there and that you care about their issues, so that you can start to bridge that gap of trust so that when they come to court, they'll feel more comfortable and be able to function better in that system.
Thank you. The next question is, how would you deal with difficult attorneys or litigants in your courtroom? And we'll begin with Ms. Ritchie.
All right, I will tell you. First of all, Santa Clara County Bar has a code of conduct. So if they start, I start even before the trial to let them know that they're going to need to comply with that. Then, if they start to become too difficult, either with my staff or with each other or with witnesses, I have occasionally had to say to them, especially with my staff, we are public servants and we are helping you, and you must not continue to act in this manner. If they're abusing a witness, I stop them like that. I've had sarcastic comments made to witnesses, and I immediately tell them that they cannot do that. If I have to, after several admonishments, I actually will say, and I had to say this to an attorney once, one more snide remark and you will be held in contempt of court. Because sometimes you got to go that far.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
The court has to be firm but fair, and I think that the way to do it is to inform the parties how the court wishes to proceed in any given matter, In other words, address the topic, tell them I'm going to give each of you time to respond to this, and each a chance to rebut each other, and then we're going to submit it, and then to keep my word in that regard. There's nothing worse than being in front of a judge where the last person who speaks seems to win, when the judge can be bulldozed. So the court has to maintain control, but you have to be fair because you don't want to punish the attorney's client for their behavior. So I think there's a fine line, and I would do it in a way that I wouldn't embarrass counsel in front of their clients or in front of the jury, so I wouldn't accidentally prejudice their case.
Thank you. Ms. Angel?
I would handle it the same way I handle difficult district attorneys right now, and that is with grace and patience and directness. You tell people what you expect and what you need, and there was a certain situation once when a certain district attorney was acting in an inappropriate way, and I took him aside and I said, you know, the things that you're saying could get you in a lot of trouble if you were saying those to a person who might report you. And he totally got it. And it was just that no one had ever told him that before. No one had ever said to him, you know, you can't talk to women that way. You can't say things that way. And he said, well, I have a lot of sisters. I said, but it's you can't do that. So that's the way I did it. You know, it's with being direct, being gracious, and being patient, and understanding that people can learn. Sometimes people just don't understand that what they're saying or doing is not appropriate at the moment.
Thank
The
you.
record will reflect I have two brothers, so that it was not me.
Not Mr. Harris.
Okay, our next question is, what is your position on news cameras in the courtroom, including video coverage? We'll begin with Mr. Harris.
Starting with the premise that most of the things that happen in court aren't interesting enough to really be followed by a film crew. It's usually reserved for something of major public interest or importance. So if the camera crew can do their job without impeding the proceedings or delaying things, they should probably be allowed.
Thank you. Ms. Angel?
Along those same lines, I completely agree. As long as it's not interfering with what's going on, unfortunately, I think it often does, because people that know they're being filmed are going to perhaps do or say different things, maybe raise the drama level depending on who the attorney is or the judge or whatever. But I do believe in transparency, and I believe that some of the things that have been alluded to, the secrecy, let me change that word, the mysteriousness of our courtrooms needs to change. And I think if the general public could see more about what we do and actually know that most of it isn't that dramatic or interesting, it's just due process, which is far more important than the drama that goes with it, maybe we would have more people aware of what goes on in the courts. And I think that's very important. I think it's important that people know what we do and how we do it and how important it is, because then they wouldn't read newspaper articles and see that somebody is charged with something and automatically assume that they're guilty. I think that's a real problem with the jury pool, is that, well, if they're charged, they must be guilty. So
Thank you. You could have finished
Getting
your
good with
sentence.
the cards.
You can always finish the sentence when the card
I don't
goes up.
remember what the rest of it was going to be. I'm just better with the cards. I'm impressed with myself, though.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Ritchie?
And actually, the court does have a procedure for evaluating cameras in the courtroom. I think it's a good idea. Again, they actually, when they do come in, they stay at the back of the courtroom so that they are not in anyone's way. Yes, absolutely, people are aware that the cameras are there, but they're far enough away that they're not concentrating on them, and the reporters are completely quiet when it happens. And again, and I think this has been said by everyone, but the more the public can know about the courts, I think the better it is.
Thank you. Our next question is, what is your experience in family law? If you have little experience, how do you think this will affect you as a judge presiding over family law matters? And we'll begin with Ms. Angel.
Thank you. I have a little bit of experience in family law. As a private attorney, you don't always get criminal cases. That is my area, but I've had some family law cases come in. Certainly family law restraining orders, because that's sort of pseudo-criminal. I don't think it's going to be a problem not having that much experience in family law. I've also had estate planning experience a little bit. The reality is, we as attorneys have been spending our entire careers learning how to interpret case law, interpret statutory law, and knowing what to do under a given situation without knowing any of the facts or without knowing any of the law initially. We have to learn it. And that would be the same thing as a judge. You're going to have to learn certain things. You're not going to know every single thing that comes along. But I have never had a problem learning quickly. I'm a very quick study, and when things come along, I have no problem asking questions if necessary, and going and doing the research and working hard. That's what it is to be a criminal defense attorney for me. I'm a hard worker, and I'll be a hard-working judge.
Thank you. Ms. Ritchie?
So I have only a little bit of family law experience. I had only a very little bit of criminal law experience, and I was able to very quickly get to know criminal law and be successful. Now, I had to work until 11 o'clock every night when I first took the bench, because I wanted to read every single file and know exactly what needed to happen, because when you are handling 60 or 70 cases in, between 9 and noon, and you've got about 90 seconds per case, you've really got to know the law fast. But I'm willing to put in that time. I don't say it'll be easy, but it's just part of the interest. It's so interesting to be a judge and to get to learn different areas of law. And family is a very important area of law, because if you can handle a case right there, you can eliminate dependency, you can eliminate juvenile, you can eliminate criminal, because those children have been handled properly.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
Family law is going to present a lot of issues that are common to criminal prosecution, and that being emotional situations, competing interests, different motivations, where it's important to have experience and to have seen a large number of cases, because of the dynamics that are going on there. One really has to judge the credibility of the witnesses carefully. As regards doing the actual cases, the first step for a judge to do would be to learn the substantive law. But from there, it should be the same as other cases, because it's based on the same evidence code, and it's very similar to civil because it's based on written submission.
Thank you. Our next question is, what unique or unusual aspect of Santa Clara County makes being a judge in this county different from any other? And we'll begin with Ms. Ritchie.
And we actually have all said that. We are such a diverse county. That is what makes it very, very different from virtually any other county in the whole state. And it gives us a lot of opportunities. It makes it a lot more interesting. We get to see in business, because I'm a civil trial judge. I have people from India who've started a business. I have people from China who've started a business. I have people from all over the world who have come here to start businesses. And I also have extraordinarily poor people who are in the system, whether they're Hispanic or Vietnamese, who also come here, and they also need to be provided with justice.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
One of the things that's happening in our county that's not happening in others is the problem in San Jose with the police department. And because of changes that were made to their pension and different benefit packages, we've had several hundred policemen leave in the last few years, and it's made crime prevention here in the city much more difficult than it has been, and the police have had to close several of their units. Like, they don't necessarily prosecute check fraud cases now, burglaries, car burglaries. You'll just get a report number. And while other counties may be facing similar difficulties, Santa Clara County, or San Jose is the biggest city in our county, and it has a dramatic impact on what happens in court.
Thank you. And Ms. Angel?
Well, I've never worked in any other county. I've only worked in Santa Clara County, so I'm not sure what other counties do, but I know that Santa Clara County's population, at least the people that I've met, are intelligent and caring, and even my clients who've been accused of crimes, and many of them are responsible for those crimes, are often good people who've done bad things and made mistakes. And I have never had a problem with a client or, a family member as long as I've been working. And I don't know if it's unique to Santa Clara County, but it certainly has been nice to have been treated with such respect by the people that I work for.
Thank you. We'll now have two more questions. So the next to the last one is, if you observed a party in your courtroom being poorly represented by an unprepared or ineffective attorney, how would you handle this situation? And we'll begin with Mr. Harris.
If I thought that the performance of the attorney was affecting the right of the defendant to have a fair trial, I would ask that attorney to come into chambers with opposing counsel and explain the situation and see what could be done about it. A court may or may not be in a position to have another counsel appointed or advisory counsel, but if that would be what would be necessary, that's what we would proceed to do.
Thank you. And Ms. Angel?
Unfortunately, I don't have a better answer than that, but that's basically what I've been through. I've actually been that appointed attorney coming in for clients a couple of times when judges have decided that the representation wasn't appropriate or there was a problem somehow. And the way that I know those two judges handled it was very carefully and privately talking to the attorney and discussing the fact that perhaps that attorney wasn't up to speed or too busy, or they were very gracious about it and got the attorney to agree to withdraw, at which point then I came in and took on the case. So I think that's the best way to handle it privately. There's no reason to embarrass people. I will say this, that I think that we all learn from our mistakes way better than we learn from the positive things that happen to us. And those attorneys, I believe, became better attorneys because of the intervention of the court privately, and nobody else had to know about it except the people that were involved.
Thank you. Ms. Ritchie?
In criminal court, that is within the power of the court. It's not within the power of the court to appoint counsel in a civil case. So in a civil case, I normally ask counsel to, could you brief that? Could you look for authority? I ask them basically to prepare more when I can see that they are not well prepared. And by doing that, they can look at the law, they can see what they need to do, and that helps them to do a much better job. Because in civil, you have much more the power, which is not as true in criminal, to ask for briefing, to ask for research. And so that is what I handle, and I try to do it very even-handedly. Even when it's pretty apparent that is one of the attorneys that is much weaker, I'll ask both of them to brief because I don't want to embarrass one of them.
Thank you. And our last question is, what life experience, if any, other than being a lawyer, do you bring to the bench, and how might that impact your ability to serve as a judge? And we will begin with Ms. Ritchie.
I have, from the time I was really young, my parents were very dedicated to serving the community, and so I used to go to Sunnyvale Community Services to help sort clothing for the poor, and so that's something I've always kept up. I just always have done things for the poor ever since I was a child. And so I've developed friendships with people who are in board and care homes. I have adopted a board and care home for the holidays so that they can have a Christmas and they can have Christmas presents that they want. I go over, I ask them, what kind of presents would be important to them. Sometimes, they just want hangers, or they want sheets, or they want a towel. And so by having a consistent interaction with people of very little means, I think it just has made me much more sensitive to the needs of the whole community.
Thank you. Ms. Angel?
Well, first of all, I have 2 teenage children, so that, I think, prepares you for just about almost anything that can come along, because before you have your children, you don't really know what's going to come, but it does. So that's one thing. I also have tried as often as I could to go into the junior highs mostly and talk to kids, at-risk kids, and talk to them about being successful and talk to them about what they can achieve if they believe in themselves. I do the same thing with my clients, because just because you've committed a crime doesn't mean your life is over. You need to be accountable for what you did, take care of your business, and then move on from that. And if you do all of that appropriately, you can then have a future that doesn't include coming back into the court system. So I think all of the things that I've been doing with young people and my clients would help me to understand all the people that will come before me as a judge.
Thank you. And Mr. Harris?
I grew up in the coal mining and farming area of Pennsylvania, and my dad was a mechanic and my mom was a clerk at Penny's, and my brothers and I are the first to go to college, and one was a teacher, one's a chiropractor, and I'm an attorney, and we've all done it on our own with work and school loans, and it's been impressed upon us since we were kids that if we were going to make anything of ourselves, it was going to be us. And my dad always said, if you're going to do something, do it the whole way, don't do it halfway. And I think that's the way I've tried to live my life. I try to give my full measure to the DA's office, and if I become a judge, I'm going to give myself over to the job.
Thank you. And now we're going to have your closing statements, which will be in the reverse order from how we began. And it's an opportunity for you to perhaps speak to something that didn't come up in the questions, or something that you think is really important about your campaign that you wish to communicate to the community. So with that in mind, we will actually begin with Mr. Harris. So you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Thank you. The impression that people are left with when they leave court is very important. Whenever you have a court hearing, not everybody can win. In civil, you may get a percentage of what you want, but you won't get the whole thing. In criminal, you're either convicted or you're not. It's very important to be fair and impartial as a judge, and to behave in a manner that brings credit to the court and peace of mind to the people that come before you. You want everyone to leave the court knowing that they had their fair shake and that justice was done, even if they didn't win.
Thank you. And Ms. Ritchie?
So experience is the most important thing for a judge. I have already been a judge for 5 years, and it is a big step from being an attorney. It's a huge learning curve. And I have already gone through learning criminal law. I hadn't done it in more than 20 years, and a lot of it had changed. I've already done that. I've already moved over to civil, and learning to be a judge and not an advocate is huge. So I have, as I said, I've handled literally thousands of cases. I've competently handled those cases. I've never been overturned by an appellate court. I've never had an ethical complaint against me. And one way you can tell that I've been very successful is that attorneys are free to challenge a judge if they don't want to go to that judge. And up until very recently, because of other matters, I was very rarely challenged. And so I have been very, very successful.
Thank you. And Ms. Angel?
I believe in people, and people are who come before the courts, and I believe that people should be treated with respect, regardless of where they come from. I believe that they should be heard, and I believe that they should feel heard once they leave, win or lose, whatever the result is, and that's what I will do as a judge. I also believe that Santa Clara County deserves competent, well-educated, knowledgeable judges with integrity. And I will be that kind of a judge. That's the way I was raised. That's the way my father and my mom taught me to be. And it's the way that I've always tried to be in everything that I have done. Try to be there to help the people that you are responsible for helping, whether it be as an attorney or a judge. I sat as a temporary judge. I have sat as a temporary judge over the last 4 years several times. And I found that the transition from being an advocate to being a judge, temporary judge as it was seamless. I'll just leave it at that since the stop sign showed up.
Thank you very much. That concludes our forum. I would like to thank the candidates for participating. I would also like to thank all the volunteers who made this forum possible, so the two leagues that co-sponsored it, Palo Alto and Los Altos Mountain View. I'd like to thank our question sorters over here, Katie Zoglin and Kathy Lazarus, our timekeepers sitting right in the front here, who did a yeoman's job of keeping everybody on time, Nancy Brewer and Carol Hyams Guthrie. Not sure if I said your second name right. And also our greeters and our sorters and our volunteers who were walking around the room and collecting questions. Let me just finish here. This forum has been designed to impart information to the voter in accordance with our belief as a league that a democratic government depends upon the informed and active participation of its citizens. We hope that the insights you have gained from this forum tonight will aid you in making your decisions when you vote. For more voter information, please visit our Smart Voter website at www.smartvoter.org. And please remember to vote on June 3rd and help make our democracy work. And let's give our candidates a hand. Thank you very much for coming tonight.